change. And you know what? It might not change, but what we're trying to do is hold up a mirror so they can reflect, is this worth giving these hours of your life away? And do you want to change the relationship or not? But especially with this age, we want to come in more as guides to keep the conversations going and not to have stoppers. And as you know, if you have this conversation in the midst of the emotion, it's never going to go well at all. Hello, Parent Footprint listeners. Welcome to the May bonus episode of Sitting Down with Dr. Dan. We have exciting news. Promo codes and links from all of our advertisers are now online at exactlyrightmedia.com/promos. Scroll until you see Parent Footprint and you'll find all of our latest deals. Thank you for supporting Parent Footprint by using our promo codes and links at exactlyrightmedia.com/promos. Okay. Now it's time for today's show, and we are here with our wonderful producer, Laura, in the virtual studio with me to answer all of your questions. Remember, every month we answer your listener questions that you submit via Facebook, X, Instagram, and email to podcast@drdanpeters.com. We read every question. Thank you for bringing your stuff to us. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Dr. Dan. Happy May. Happy almost June and
we're
summer.
Getting through it. Mm-hmm.
And wow, I want to thank our listeners as well for their great questions. One of my favorite parts of the day is finding your listener questions and your thoughts and comments at the inbox podcast@drdanpeters.com. And before we get started, I want to add to our exciting news that in addition to finding our promos at Exactly Right Media, you will start to see some links and information about this on our social media. So check out our stories. And we also have a highlight section on Instagram that says shop. And that will also take you direct link to some of our incredible advertisers.
We want you to save money. Save money on good products.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So let's dive in. This is a bit of a lengthy question, and I feel like it touches on a few subjects that many of our listeners are going to be nodding their head about. So question number one, a little bit of shuffling papers. Hello, Dr. Dan. Thank you for your podcast. Each episode helps me along my parenting journey in so many ways. My question is about navigating safety issues without harming child innocence. My daughter is 9 and spends much of her after-school time playing around our home with her neighborhood friends. Recently, a boy in our neighborhood reported a car following him and taking pictures. By the way, when I read this, I was just, all the high alerts go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I talked to my daughter about listening to her gut and coming inside if she ever encountered someone suspicious. I tried to tread lightly because I know my daughter feels everything so deeply, as do I. I said that some people want to steal cars because she got wind of the pictures from a friend. I explained that so many people in our neighborhood and world have good intentions, but a few do not, and her gut instinct will let her know what to do. I watched a bit of her innocence slip away in that conversation. I want my daughter to keep thinking the world is full of rainbows, but as she gets older, I also want to gently let her know it's not. This is so hard, Dr. Dan. Any advice? And as a side note, right now, as I'm writing this, I'm out front of our house reading, keeping an eye on the kids playing, at least most of the time. My daughter still readily goes outside to play, doesn't seem too fazed by the incident, but she does have more questions about robbers and safety. She has never seen the news. We only have had 2 talks with her about actual neighborhood safety. Thanks, Dr. Dan. I can't wait to hear your advice. And came through email, so I'm going to say this is from Ginger from Texas. Thank you, Ginger.
Yeah, Ginger, this is such a well-articulated question. And just by what you are saying and writing about shows how aware and thoughtful and purposeful you are being. with this whole issue, and even how you had the conversation and thinking about it before. And you all know that's what we one of the things that we highlight the most is being intentional, being aware, and being purposeful and regulating ourselves before we go into these situations where we might be feeling a little anxious, a little on edge, or we're anticipating our child might have some of those feelings, which then triggers those feelings in ourselves, which triggers those feelings in our kids. So this is it's a very dynamic process with our kids when we are having these conversations, and when we as parents have to decide what to say and how to say it for maximum impact and minimum unnecessary fear. And the reason I'm saying unnecessary fear, because as we continue to develop as a species, as a human species, or in some cases maybe devolve as a species in certain situations, we need to give our kids information about, you guys hear me say this, how the world works. And I think, Ginger, you did a beautiful job by floating out some of the high level information about cars maybe being stolen, as opposed to people being stolen and kids being stolen. So it was like the first way of having to pull back the curtain of this innocence. And clearly, you do a great job of not having the news on, which highly recommend, because most news is there to invoke fear in us, unfortunately. And so I think it is about trying to match the child's age, the child's level of innocence and naivete with the minimum necessary information for that moment. So, what you did, I think, was spot on. And some innocence is going to slip away. And what I have learned over time is if we can be the ones to give the information that impacts the innocence, hopefully and more likely we're going to do it more thoughtfully than how they will be exposed to it at school, in the neighborhood with older kids, with cell phones, with videos. Like, the kids are going to get this information somehow. And so I think coming from us is ideal. Doesn't always work that way, but it's ideal. I also really like how talked about you really were talking about intuition, telling your child to trust her instincts. And that is a really important um, characteristic, human dimension for us to develop in our kids, to let them know that there is something called intuition. There is something called instincts, that we all humans, we have them. We all have them. Some of us have a very strong dose and it's almost overwhelming. Other people aren't tapped into it, but still have it, and it can be cultivated. And that is to trust your gut. Trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right or something is weird, err on the side of caution. Come home, leave the situation, go to a friend, go to another trusted adult. And so I just think you handled it well. And I just want to validate the reality of loss of innocence for our kids. And I know as I scroll back through my memories of watching innocence being lost in our kids, it is rough. It is tough. And as the kids get older, there's just more and more of these conversations needed. I'm reminded of having a conversation that I was dreading having with one of our kids when we were taking a trip to Europe, and there was a European friend, and they were talking about going to the bars and to the nightclubs. And with this daughter, I really struggled with how to have the conversation about things that happen at these places and things to look out for. And it turned out to be a good conversation where she actually reflected back to me that my fears I just had to say, these are my fears because of what I know that's out there. And she said, well, actually, those are my fears too. And so we were able to have one of these conversations. Of course, this is a much more higher level conversation than you would have with your 9-year-old, but it doesn't end. And I feel like it's our job to do this.
I'm nodding and taking this all in, and again, the golden rules of Dr. Dan coming into play here about being age appropriate, being the source for your child, open communication, and that the parenting journey continues. And
Mhm.
this is a wonderful mother. Ginger, you're amazing. I'm saying this
Yeah.
not as a
Mother
doctor
to
or anyone
mother,
with
mother to
degrees, but
mother.
mother to mother.
Yeah.
Yes, you took the words out of my
Yeah.
head. Dr. Dan and I are so wonderfully in sync as a team. And so I'm not surprised that he knew I was going to praise Ginger as a mom and a human and a contributor to society. And I also want to say that this is a really wonderful kind of meta moment, but of Ginger trusting her own instinct and intuition, that she was feeling like she needed to listen to her, whatever you want, the inner voice. And she also needed a little bit of validation, which is why I'm assuming she wrote to us to get Dr. Dan's take on things. Well, just to have that guidance and touchstone, because she's a regular listener. So all of that is making me nod my head. I also want to talk about, because we have twins and they have different paths in our family, one typical, one neurotypical or neurodiverse, that we've had to deal with safety issues from a very young age and to customize what was needed for each child.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we followed as our golden rules, which align, because I've learned so much of my parenting from Dr. Dan, is what's age appropriate and also what's maturity appropriate for that
Mhm.
individual child. I do remember around age 9 was a big moment in developmental milestones of their concept of the wider world, and that little bubble we keep our kids in being a bit they're a bit more exposed at that age, I guess is the best way to say it. So, that little cocoon we're in starts to unravel and more of the world gets in. So I want to just say, keeping all of that in mind. And one, I don't know if it's a concept or a book. I remember a video, and I'm dating myself here, but there was something that worked for both of our children. Again, you probably have to Google this and find it at a library. They're probably
PBS
quite
special, right?
iterations, yes, but it was called, or at least the concept was called, stranger danger.
Yeah,
And it
totally.
was about the levels of stranger danger, which is, the car
Mhm.
that pauses in front of the house or the person that it just doesn't seem quite right. But the great thing that this concept of teaching kids about safety, it goes beyond the actual stranger to say, there are also people in your life that you may encounter that you do know. And there are some rules around that as well for safety. And again, not to frighten the child or create terror, but that there are, things that mom and dad or mom and mom or dad or caregivers are going to communicate to a child as they get older. And you can always reach us if you have a question. And if something
Yes.
doesn't feel right, go to a trusted adult. We are here to listen and help navigate all of that. And I just remember that, there were just moments where we had to rely on the good people in the world and the concept that there are a few bad apples, but most people are good and kind, and there are a lot of helpers. But we are not protecting our kids if we don't give them these lessons. And those lessons, as you just said, your Europe anecdote makes me
Mhm.
think about, you know, young adults are still looking to
Yes.
us as parents for touchstones and advice. And then at other times, we're still needing to parent and talk about, hey,
Yes.
this is a brand new experience for you. You might not know this. It's the first job. Something feels weird in an elevator. Maybe get out of the elevator. Dark alleys alone at night, for all of us, not a great idea. Maybe your child's going into a city environment as a young adult and they grew up in a more rural environment. So I'm going to end this by taking it totally full circle, making it about me and my career. But one of the books that I worked on in my book publishing career is called The Gift of Fear. And the author is Gavin de Becker.
Mm.
And he does work for a lot of celebrities and kind of high tech people. But it was a wonderful read and campaign I think he was on Oprah and a bunch of national media, but it just talked about how many adults try to squash our own instinct and our own intuition. That is such a gift to have and to kind
Mm-hmm.
of, foster in your children. And I'll put this in the show notes, but if anyone wants to read a great book that is not, frightened, don't leave your house concept, but just to be more in tune with your whole self, and that kind of primal instinct is there for a reason. And I
Yeah.
think when
Yeah.
you feel empowered and you model that
Mm-hmm.
in your own safety, I just think that, again, taking a page out of the Dr. Dan world, what we model and show our kids, they're listening and looking. And so if you're interested in reading more,
Yes.
I would say take a look at that book as
You
well.
just reminded me of something that I'm really glad you brought that in. So when I was researching for my book on anxiety several years ago now, um, there was this book I read called Poe's Heart and the Mountain Climber. I think is by Dr. Restak. And this guy is this brilliant neuroscientist, psychiatrist, other stuff, just this brilliant individual. And he talked about the difference between regular anxiety and fear and signal anxiety, which is what you are really speaking to. Where signal
Wow.
anxiety, which so I like this term, signal anxiety it's our human survival instincts signaling us to do something ain't right. And he gave the
Mm,
story, and he was traveling. I want to say, I don't know, it was Nepal, India, somewhere in the far east. And he was supposed to get on a plane, this little tiny rickety plane, where the pilot did not look quite right, like maybe was off in some way, and the plane
oh
looked
dear.
disheveled. And he started to develop all of this anxiety and almost start to have an anxiety attack. And he said he realized that was his body saying, "Don't get on that plane."
Wow.
So I
I
really
love
like
that.
I really like
I,
with this point that you're bringing up, and how we need to, again, back to trusting ourselves. Um, we do have a lot of irrational fears, but we also have very rational fears. And as we get older, we
yes.
want to discern the difference between our irrational ones and our actually human instinct for survival.
Right. Right. Will you say the name of that book one more time for
Yes.
our listeners, Dr. Dan, or what you
Yeah.
think it is?
It's even a very interesting name, Poe's Heart and the Mountain Climber. Like Edgar Allan
Wow.
Poe, Poe, Poe's
Okay.
Heart.
Wow. That's great. We're going to put this in the show notes because
Yeah.
I'm very interested in
Yeah.
checking out this book. So, all right, listeners, with a little primer in fear and irrational fear, anxiety, and
Hmm.
where to go with it for yourself and also for your parenting world. So I know we spent a lot of time on number one. We're going to get into number two. This is more of me as the producer getting
Pop
the signal
culture.
from, yeah, social pop culture articles. I'm screaming. Phil has
Yes.
to work on that volume for me. I just got excited. So here it is. Recently, Laura Rossi, have seen a lot of posts about the trad wife trend. So I wanted us to discuss it today because I'm seeing comments about people feeling pressure, people feeling offended. What is trad wife or hashtag? I'm saying TRAD wife. Our listeners might want some advice. And to prep a little bit, one article that felt like a good way of explaining it. CNBC, The Rise of the Trad Wife, Why Some Women Say They Are Opting Out of Work. It's pretty recent, April 24th, 2024. Was updated the same day, and the authors were or are Jessica Dickler and Anna Teresa Sola. So I'd love
Hmm.
to just talk about this a little bit because it is trending.
It is trending. And I actually, this is newer to me. What I was more familiar with, which is thought to be in the same venue, is the stay-at-home girlfriend that had become that started trending before the trad wife. I think the stay-at-home girlfriends um, kind of started this stay-at-home wife, I guess would be the traditional way of looking at it. But now it's this trad wife where it's really being put out as glamorous, as choice, um, as as this is how I want to live my life, and I'm happy living my life this way. And I'm gonna interested how you as and they're saying this is a lot of Gen Z stuff,
Yes.
but so
Yes.
Gen Z would be more, I think, a lot of the girlfriend, and I guess a lot of some, I don't know, because I'm looking at you and me as Gen Xers, so I'm interested in,
Yes.
how this
Absolutely.
crosses the generations. And as I thought about this issue and topic, I think it's just always really important, that we approach these situations, these human situations, and everything we're seeing as much as possible without judgment. And I know there's just it's so easy for us to judge these days. I think we have a very judgy culture and a media that, this polarized world that we're living in. So things are good and things are bad, and many of us have lost sight of the gray of how to look at things and have a conversation. So going into this with that idea, so there's several sides to this. So some people are saying this is a choice I am making, and I'm like stepping into my womanhood with this choice. And by the way, I'm saying this as a man, so not so I just know that's another caveat. Um, and other people and other women are saying this is actually this is nothing new. This is just another version of the patriarchy, right? This is another version of, um, being dependent on a man for your livelihood. And be careful, because you might find yourself in a situation where you don't feel you have choices and you don't have a way um, to provide for yourself, and you can get yourself into a vulnerable situation, right? So that's the
Right.
other side of it. Now, when we look at the statistics, um, I think there are a lot of people who are also taken by this concept because it's privilege for many, which is so many households are you need more than one income earner just to make it, and so many people are going paycheck to paycheck. So there's that too. Like, okay, that must be nice, if I would be able
Yes.
to do that. Um, and then finally, this other piece is, since COVID, for women and actually for men, there are more people pulling back from, like, just the blinders on your professional life and career and moving up the good old ladder, because looking at, like, there's more to life, things can happen, and sort of taking an assessment of how do I want to live my life, and where do I want to spend my time? And so I think that's part of this too. Is so there are, the article said there's some women who are actually like toning it down on having to be, a successful professional, a successful spouse or partner, a successful parent, and being like, this is my way of saying, you know what, I'm going to opt out and I'm going back to this traditional role, but we're going to call it something that's not traditional. And so I think there's merit to all of this stuff. And I'm wondering, as you, Gen Xer woman, mom, professional,
Yes.
what do you think about this? And partner and spouse as well.
All of these things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So very good peeling back the layers. My point of view, and maybe it is because, I'm not this younger generation, but rather a little older and wiser, I'd like to say. Um, this is another trend. And so this is going to sound parental or older sister like, but I'm trying to take all of these with a little bit of humor or, whatever you want to call grain of salt, or just, trying to realize that this is not that different than the scrunchy mom parenting trend or the gentleish parenting trend, that it's a trend. It is grown or growing out of social media, which we all have to have caution
Hmm.
around. And when we're in, just remember red flags are surrounding us because a lot of this is done purposefully to be provocative. That even these discussions of these trends or this content, it's deliberate. It's not always what you see on social media. I think there are roots and true anchors of factually based experiences of individuals. But again, there is almost a level of, again, influencers are acting and they're doing things for the camera. So I think listening to your instinct, parenting and being a partner out of a place of love and confidence, and being aware that we can always compare our place in life and existence to others, whether it's on social media or not. And trying to kind of stay true to that, having open communication with your partner, talking about your goals and needs. I think there are lessons from the pandemic that have opened a lot of eyes. And so I do support the intention of being present and the intention of making sure you're enjoying your daily life, because we only have right now. I mean, again, and this is me being a little bit philosophical, maybe sounding, like I said, that older sister vibe a little bit, but I think we are all in this wonderful place in history to kind of pick and choose and curate what works for us. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe there are things in the trad wife world that would help you and your family. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
even if you're a man, you could do some trad wife stuff. Like you were saying,
Yeah.
this is man saying it, patriarchy, but maybe there's some things like out of that feel really authentic to you as, a
Yes.
male.
Yes.
And at the same time, realizing that whisperings of all of this trending parenting stuff go back forever and ever. And, I remember Tiger Mom stuff when social media wasn't even that big,
Oh
but
yeah.
that was a book that came out, and Amy
Yeah.
Chua, and it was just all over the place. There was stuff about dating from this book a long time ago called The Rules, and how women were supposed to act. And there was a big uproar on the Today Show and all these talk shows about, essentially like the dating world, and some women did the rules and others didn't. And so it's kind of
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
different trend, different day. And so
Totally.
keep all of that in mind. And the hardest thing in adulting, whether you're a parent or not, is just kind of figuring out who you are and feeling pressure. And because there is social media, there are windows into everyone's world, it's really hard to tune out the noise. And so I felt
Yeah.
like when I read all of this, this is getting so much attention, and there is
Yes.
polarizing stuff around it. It's also like kind of rippling out into other areas that I don't want us to get into, but there are sort of things aligning with some religions around this trad wife stuff and other cultural things, societal things, economic things, as you touched on.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to go way down to the roots, and the roots just feel like pressure to be something you're not, and try to avoid it. Or if you
Mm-hmm.
like something and it feels right for you, own it.
So
And
wise. So wise. Yes,
well,
that's
I've
wisdom.
I've
You've
been
been around.
around for a while, Dr. Dan.
You've
I'm
been
not
around. You've been
I'm no
around.
Gen
Yeah,
Zer,
yeah.
okay?
You're
What
also
comes
making
after Gen Z, Dr. Dan? What's
uh Gen
uh,
Z is there is a new name.
there's something.
There's a new name, but I can't think of
We
it
need
right now.
that.
Yeah.
I'm looking to see if Phil's putting anything in the chat. He's younger than us. Maybe he knows what comes after Gen Z. I feel like is it like alpha? Are
Yeah,
they going into
something
like
like
the
that.
next alphabet?
It's something like that.
Right. That is
Yeah.
another show. I'm
That's
making
another
a
show.
note so we can talk
Okay.
about the labels of the next generations. I see
Those
Phil is
those
typing.
humans.
Gen Alpha.
Yeah, Gen Alpha. There we
Hello.
go.
I
From
know what's
Phil behind the
happening.
scene. Okay, but you're also making me think about the concept of jealousy that
Okay.
comes up when we see these different trends and things. And it's making me think about our conversation, our show with Elise Lunan a bit back, where about her book Seven Deadly Sins, and
So true. Oh, she's so
in
great.
jealousy. And we didn't get a chance to dive into this concept as much, so I'm glad it's just popping up for me here. The point that she makes about jealousy, which really stuck with me, is when we're jealous, it's kind of like fear. Fear doesn't just have to be fear. Fear is a signal. So the idea of jealousy, which has gotten turned, the green-eyed monster, as Shakespeare said, it's got like we all think about it as this negative thing. But jealousy can actually be information to us that, hey, I want that. Like, oh, must be nice. Must be nice for you to work part time, or for you to have more time in your day, or for you not to work at all. And if we're finding ourselves triggered, it's a question for us. right? It's a question for
I
us,
love that.
right? To ask ourselves, okay, why am I jealous of this individual? And how can that person become what is now oft termed in some of the spiritual worlds of an expander for me? So um, how can I see, like, how can I get this? What can I do in my life to have more of this? So I just think a lot of these things I'm now looking at when I get triggered, I'm like, why is that triggering me? When I find myself like, oh, that's nice, must be good for them. Like, what do I want something they want? It doesn't have to be a tangible thing. It could be just a space, time. I don't know. So just more thing to think about. All of these things are fascinating, and we humans are fascinating creatures.
Yeah. Facts.
Yeah,
Facts,
yeah,
as the kids say.
yeah,
Facts.
yeah,
That's really
yeah,
something actually to think about. Just right, wait a minute. Let's listen to what I need to dialogue about with myself.
yeah.
Because that that's usually the root cause of a lot of emotions in this place of kind of competition. All right, let's get into we have a couple more questions. These were really great discussions. This one is really interesting, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Our 13-year-old son is really, really devastated when his favorite sports teams lose. It can tank his entire day or night, and it's a very extreme reaction. Do you have any advice for this mom and dad, Dr. Dan?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So this is not all that uncommon. So first thing, and this is not just, well, let me say this way. Uh, People listening, you might know some adults who are like this, who their team that does set the day, night, next day, whether there's a win, depending on what kind of sports fan you are. We are now in the NBA playoffs, and I know
Go Celtics.
there's a lot of this going around. Okay, well, at least the Warriors beat them a couple years ago in the finals. So
I know. I was
what?
going to say this
I will say
is.
it's the Celtics. You know what? The Celtics have been rising. They've been rising, and
Yes.
many will say this is their year. So,
We
uh,
don't want to get into East Coast, West Coast
no,
rivalry because we both love the coasts, but
yes, we
I just
do.
had to be a
But
little
this is a
silly.
perfect example. This is a perfect example. So first of all, there's a lot of adults who happens to. There's a lot of competition, this intensity, and also there's this connection to the team that it's like these players. You feel like these players, and this is the we know that sports teams give meaning to people too. So if any of you, I think one of the greatest shows on now is Welcome to Wrexham. Ryan Reynolds, Sean McElhenney bought the Wales football team and you get to see how in this town, the people, like, they live for this team. This is part of their life. And so it trickles down. And I have to say, so we have to look at ourselves. What are we modeling for our kids is one thing. Also, I find that personally, I am surprised how much my mood could actually be altered by a team that I really care about. I'm like, are you serious? Like, I'm really going to bed like frustrated, unhappy when I just had all of this entertainment. So it's just fascinating how we get pulled in, and it becomes part of, actually, for many people, part of their identity, like their team, their players, their records, and it also can then become part of one's self-esteem. Like, I feel better when my team's winning. I feel less good about myself so there's this merger that happens. So with the teenager, we also know that there's a lot of intensity and hormones that go along with this phase in life. And so I think the conversations are away from the game. Hey, let's talk about being a sports fan, and let's talk about what happens, and use some of your own experiences, and how is it that how it impacts you, and do you like the way it impacts you? Would you like it to impact you less? So it's trying to have these conversations about trying to disentangle the feeling and the reaction, because you get sucked in. You just get completely sucked in, which is what all media wants us to do, is to get completely sucked in. So we lose objectivity between ourself and whatever thing we are wanting to be a part of or are a part of. And I think we have to help our kids with some objectivity and know that it's not going to change overnight, and it might take a while to change. And you know what? It might not change. But what we're trying to do is hold up a mirror so they can reflect, is this worth giving these hours of your life away? And do you want to change the relationship or not? But especially with this age, we want to come in more as guides to keep the conversations going and not to have stoppers. And as you know, if you have this conversation in the midst of the emotion, it's never going to go well at all.
I agree. And I don't have anything to add to that. That's really helpful. And thank you. All right. We're coming up to our last question for this episode. And again, thank you to all of our listeners. So we're ending on a really interesting question about caffeine. And I think, we don't give medical advice on this show. So we're going to talk about a study and a couple of articles. And really, it's just, I think, about parenting rules and concepts here. So, Dr. Dan, we are concerned about our twins consuming too much caffeine, and we wonder how we can help our high schoolers reduce their intake. We are not supportive of caffeine on a regular basis. A couple of articles that we took a look at in response to that question. There's a CBSNews.com teen caffeine story, and then something on a website called mottpoll.org about teen caffeine consumption. I'm going to link to both of those in our episode copy. And
excellent.
Maybe some parents are going to need to get some advice on this too. All of us can go down the slippery slope of a lot of caffeine. So if you want to get medical stuff, you can read the studies about what it's doing to the bodies of young people. But I think the advice here will be on setting some rules and age appropriateness. But I'm only guessing because I am not Dr. Dan and I am not Dr. Laura. So
yes. Well,
there you go.
I was thinking back on this of how caffeine has become such a normalized part of our culture, and trying to think back when this happened for teenagers in the U.S. We know that in many European countries, coffee, tea at young ages has always been more cultural.
I didn't drink coffee in high school.
No,
I didn't. In junior high school, or middle school, it's called now.
But I think coffee. College.
Soda had caffeine.
College was the first time I think I had coffee, because you'd go to the coffee house and it was kind of a cool adult. Like I remember feeling like, oh, this is kind of adult. I'm having coffee. Yeah. I drank alcohol long before I drank coffee, right? So I was thinking back. I think Starbucks, like when all of a sudden coffee became mainstream, whatever year that was, and then energy drinks, Red Bull and the others.
That's true. Yes.
That became part of culture. And then also the other unfortunate thing is kids having more and more schoolwork, more and more activities, sleeping much less. And this also has come on with probably 2012. People talk about with smartphones being absolutely everywhere. So less sleep, kids, for all these reasons. And then now kids are tired. So where do you go to? You go to caffeine, which is the legal drug in our culture. And so this study, University of Michigan, they surveyed parents of kids ages 13 to 18 and found that 1 in 4 says their teen consumes caffeine every day or nearly every day. Okay, so 1 in 4, that's 25%. I'm guessing it's higher because I don't think parents don't always know. Like out here, there's 7-Elevens everywhere, these, convenience stores, and kids go there like right after middle school. Like I like right after middle school, and they're going to the energy drink section, the Coke section. So really common. And the American Academy of Pediatrics says, ideally no caffeine use at all for youth, but some experts then say, okay, 1 cup a day is fine. Right. So there's this, okay, you shouldn't. And then, okay, maybe 1 cup. And the Mott's poll, so the other article, the 2024 Mott poll. So this is very new.
Yes.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, they broke down why teens drink caffeine. And so here's the breakdown. 43% said because it's their favorite product. 23% said because their friends do, their peers do. 18% said to stay awake. I actually think that's probably a little higher.
Well, yeah.
16% said because of their early school start. So that kind of goes together, right? Like they have to stay awake. So that to me is like one third right there. And then to help study or focus is another 13%. So caffeine, does help with focus. And when we think of the stimulant medicine that's used by people who have ADHD and used stimulants that are used very commonly non-prescribed in college for peak performance and staying up studying, which is something that's a real thing. Um, Basically, that is like having tons. The stimulant medication is like having lots of coffee. So there's a similarity, like this alertness to have your brain. Um, so all of this is, I'm going to say, like we have to educate our kids about all this. We have to talk about it because we know that caffeine and too much caffeine with kids and teens, it can affect your mood, right? You can be more
Mhm.
anxious. You can have more irritability when you don't have it. It affects your sleep. You can't sleep as much if you have caffeine in your system. It can affect your school performance. You think you're being focused, but you're actually being jittery and
Jittery
distracted,
is the word I
right?
think about. Yeah.
Right. I feel, yeah, jittery is on a bad caffeine day. It can cause
Yeah.
headaches, stomach aches, and you can have heart palpitations. Like I know some kids that think they're having panic attacks, and I'm talking to them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well after school I have 2 quick energy drinks." Like, well, that's going to get your heart going like a panic attack,
Anxiety or
right?
panic. Yeah.
Anxiety. So
Facts.
all of
Okay.
this is about education, conversation, and for parents, we also have to look at our own behavior. Like how much caffeine do we have a day? What are we showing our kids? It's kind of the same thing with alcohol. If our kids they're experimenting, yes, we're adults, but we have to look at what we're modeling, how easy it is around, how much it's part of our culture, and have these conversations because you can't do this or not under my roof. Um, that is just the Romeo and Juliet effect in my experience. It's like then they're gonna be like, well, yeah, watch me. I'm just not gonna show you. I'm just gonna keep doing it. And we know so much of our kids' lives as they go through middle school and high school becomes more and more just away from us, whether it's on that phone that we can't get access to all the social media or just where they're going. Like you might be able to track them, but it doesn't mean like we're still not at a place where we have a camera on them. And hopefully we will not get there because that will not be good for human development. But we don't know
No way.
what they're doing. They go to the grocery store. What'd you do? Oh, we got a snack. They're not going to say, and an energy drink, right? If it's something that's prohibited. So we need to really talk about just the physiological impact, what the experts say, why we need to manage it, and then ask them, why are they using it? Why are they drinking it? It's just to help them, so you can understand it, help them get more in touch with themselves. And if it's, well, I'm exhausted all the time, I stay up late for this, I have to get up early for this. Okay, well, is there other ways we can think about getting you more sleep? Are there other alternatives we can use to caffeine? Some other natural remedies to help with energy or to help with focus. So it's really a dialogue. Of course, if it's totally out of control, I mean, you got to get more serious with it. But the whole thing is restricting is a last resort I find in teens because it just creates more conflict, and you're wanting to work with them together and empower them because they're going to be going away at some point and being on their own and doing whatever they want and being as
Yes.
regulated or unregulated as they're going to be. So like it starts now with helping with regulation.
Great answer again. And I will just add that when I read this question, I kind of took it down a generalist path to say, as parents, talking to our kids about healthy habits is just a really useful conversation to continue to
Yes.
have age appropriately up until whenever. I mean, it's
Yep.
an ongoing dialoguing about something really important. And if, as a parent, you are seeing something that appears to be an unhealthy habit, that's time to have that conversation in a calm, quiet, um, honest time that isn't you know setting like ultimatums or shaming, but rather, hey, wanted to talk to you about this. What
Yes.
do you think? And I feel like, again, I'm in the swapping mood today, but for this, I was like, this could be about somebody who's staying up too late, eating too much chocolate, or,
Right. Right.
needs more fruit,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
doesn't drink enough water. I mean, there are so many different things. It's going back to healthy habits that are going to
Yes.
be, lifelong investments in our physical well-being. So I think
Yes.
it's just, I'm going to tie it all together before we get to the outro, which is just, this is an example of parents having a gut instinct, intuition, reaction to something going on with their high school twins that they want to make sure they're navigating the right way. But there's there's something there that's
Right.
giving them
Right.
a little, hey, pay attention to this.
Yes.
So
Yes. And
what
don't
do
be
you think? Is
afraid.
that,
Don't be afraid to say, hey, I've noticed something that I would just like to talk to you about.
yeah,
And even like, I noticed this, I could be wrong, but I just feel like I'd like to discuss this with you, hear what your thoughts are. Right? Disarm.
awesome.
The Columbo.
Yeah,
Disarm. 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 Disarm.
disarm.
Yeah. All right.
Good discussions today, Dr. Dan.
Yeah.
We have a lot of
Good
things to add for
stuff.
links in
Good
the copy.
stuff. Yeah, you guys, thank you for these questions. And Laura and I say this, Phil and we say this every time, which is we continue to learn with you. So like all of these questions just help us stretch and grow as well. We are so all in this together. So keep them coming. You know where to follow us at Parent Footprint Podcast on Facebook and on Instagram and on X at Dr. Dan Peters. You know, our website, what's our website?
Sorry. I'm going to put myself on mute.
Yeah. And also our website, www.drdanpeters.com. A reminder, our weekly shows, Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan, drop every Thursday. Thank you for listening. And now our bonus episodes drop the last Tuesday of each month, all in your regular feed. Okay. Thanks for being part of our community. And I'm going to ask you to do two things, as I always do, and listen to these words myself. Try to be the person you want your child to become, and ask yourself the guiding question, what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Mountain Spring High, composed and performed by Gabriel Lewis. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.